Set that timer.
Get that going.
All right, my name's Lara and I'm an alcoholic.
Lara.
Well, y'all are just looking so beautiful. Let's see. All right, it's been a minute. I've known that I was going to talk for quite a few months now. I knew a couple things, that my sponsor told me I had to wear a dress and or dress up anyway, and I knew that I'd be talking to a room full of drunks. So that's all I know about what's going to happen tonight, as far as my story. I have a story. It's my story. Nobody else has it. But it's really. We've been reading this book lately that really talks a lot about how Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of storytelling. And this is how we get sober, is by telling our story and listening, learning to listen, which is like a spiritual experience all in and of itself. For me, a self-centered alcoholic, to be able to listen to what another person is saying is great practice. And I really like it. And even now today, I still have to really pay attention, because I bring my knitting to the meeting, my crocheting, or, that's one thing I didn't like about Zoom, because I could just turn my camera off and check out, and the Zoom meeting sort of became background noise. And while I was busy doing other things, which got me through a really difficult last 2.5 years. And I wouldn't do that every time. I just, Zoom for me was super helpful, but it just, I didn't have to be accountable. And showing up, I have to be accountable. And so I only go to in-person meetings now, except for the ones that I don't go to in person. Well, I'm meeting with my my sponsor. We study the traditions once a month and do the concept study. Although I do come down here to do that. So usually, there's magic that happens in these rooms where we tell the stories and we listen to the stories. That's what this is about. We witness. I get to witness your imperfections, and you get to witness my imperfections, and that is what this is about. This is that's where the healing happens. And that's why Alcoholics Anonymous works. Anyway, so when I got sober, let's see, I was 17 years old when I got sober. I started drinking when I was 11. I grew up in an alcoholic home. Alcoholic homes are the gift that keep on giving, all kinds of stuff happens in alcoholic homes, just the common thing, growing up in an alcoholic home is not why I'm an alcoholic. But it helped create some of helped form my personality and character. And has made my life really interesting. So I took my first drink when I was 11. I drank everything I could. I grew up with alcoholism. I knew that I did not want to be anything like my mom and dad, or anybody that they had around. I knew that I didn't want to do that. But lo and behold, there did seem to be some sort of pull. And when I drank, first time I drank, I had everybody in the neighborhood bring steal what they could from their parents and bring it to my house. And we had a wide array of things. All I remember is brandy and cold duck wine and Michelob or something. I don't, whatever. But But the point is that I remember just for a brief moment, wow, I like this feeling. And then I quickly overshot the mark and blacked out, threw up, and passed out. And I did wake up the next morning in so much like physical pain, like I could not move my body. And I thought, wow. And I did think, I don't ever want to do that again because I am I am sick. So I quickly found another route to change my consciousness, which was readily available because I grew up in an alcoholic, drug addicted home. So I started doing drugs almost immediately and realized that if I do the right drugs, I could drink way more without, those dire consequences. So that's what I set out to do. I was really not interested in feeling how I felt. I was a very anxious child also. Uh, I the only award I ever won in school was for most concerned. I was like in second grade. Really, it's funny, but it's true. I'm still a very concerned individual, but I was a child and I was like in second grade, so that was my childhood, right? Concerned as hell about what was going on. Uh, so, alcohol and helped alleviate that. Um, and I didn't feel like I belonged. I was an only child in this alcoholic home. And being raised an only child afforded me a couple of things that have been with me, which is I don't need anybody for anything. It became real obvious that I wasn't going to get my needs met from my parental units, and so I just fiercely independent. And as I'm sure some of you know, when you come into Alcoholics Anonymous, fiercely independent, you don't need a sponsor, right? And so that's been an interesting process. The first sponsor I got, I was 6 months sober before I got her, and I was already on my 4-step because I could do this by myself. And I told her that when I was done with my 4-step, I'd let her know when I needed to do my 5th step. And she just smiled and said, okay. And so anyway, it's been interesting. My first meeting was at the South End Alano Lounge in Renton, down on Rainier Avenue. It's no longer there. It was August 19th, 1986. It wasn't the first time I tried to get sober, but hopefully it was the last time. And the thing about getting sober this time is that I have maintained a willingness to go to any lengths to stay sober. I don't know where that came from. I don't know where that willingness came from. But it's never left me yet. And being willing to go to any lengths to stay sober has meant a whole bunch of different things over the course of my sobriety. It's meant, but at the beginning it meant going to, when I sobered up, I was 17. I thought, of course I thought, how the hell am I going to stay sober for the rest of my life and not ever drink for the rest of my life? And of course, the old timer said, we just do this one day at a time. And, but I fell in with a group of young people that were sober at Serenity Hall. That's where I got sober. And when it was down on 3rd and Wells, and there was a group of young people, and they were doing what they were doing the deal. And one of those people is here tonight, Gretchen. And we did what we had to do to stay sober. We played quarters with espresso. We drove all up and down the I-5 corridor, going to meetings everywhere. Sometimes Fremont had a meeting, Hoot Owl every night at that time. We'd drive up to Fremont, go to Hoot Owl's. we just did what we had to do. We were meeting hopping, we were staying at, drinking coffee all night long, talking to each other about, how unmanageable our lives were, but how we were still staying sober, and, it took me a while. Uh, uh, my first sponsor, bless her heart, she introduced me to the Joe and Charlie Big Book, tapes. I actually saw Joe and Charlie when they were here. I think it was like in 1987 when they were at the Valley Medical Center, and they did their workshop, a weekend-long workshop, and that was life-changing in a lot of ways. But really, what changed my trajectory of sobriety um, was I met my first husband in Fremont Hall. I mean, I was going to say I don't recommend getting husbands out of Fremont Hall, but actually, that relationship was an amazing relationship. We didn't stay together. We stayed together about 7 years, and we have a child together. But what ended up happening is my first husband ended up getting introduced to the Big Book workshops. There was this big, swell of workshops from California via Colorado, via Canada, via, and they, some super promoters from California came up and started pushing this Big Book workshop idea. And my husband at the time got introduced to it. And I had about 4.5 years sober when I went to my first workshop. And that's when I first met Stephen and Nancy. And that was the first time I realized that I was a real alcoholic. I mean, I knew I was an alcoholic because my life was completely unmanageable. I had been sitting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for 4.5 years, nodding and agreeing and relating and knowing that I belonged in Alcoholics Anonymous. But it wasn't until I was taken through the book in a way that, with the dictionary and, honestly, the Big Book, the Joe and Charlie tapes kind of put some perspective on it, but going through it in a way where, paragraph by paragraph, looking up the words that you didn't know what they meant, and having it explain to me what it meant to be a real alcoholic. That is when I knew I belonged in Alcoholics Anonymous, that I had a phenomenon of craving, that when I drank, I wasn't able to control how much I drank. And that I had a mental obsession that, they told me I was probably going to drink again because that's what real alcoholics do. And the craziest thing I've ever done was totally sober, and that's pick up the first drink thinking it was going to be different. So I knew that my main problem centered in my mind, right? So I had these things. So, it was explained to me in a way that I could understand, and I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that I was a real alcoholic. Getting sober at 17, I have all these ideas. Well, maybe it was just a phase, right? Maybe whatever, the things that alcoholics like to tell themselves, the delusions that I like to tell myself, right? And so I like to say that I relate to the story of a man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking, right? And that he was able to put the drink down because he saw that it was that he was drinking out of control, and he remained bone dry for 25 years. But after retirement, out came the bottle and the carpet slippers, and he was dead in 4 years, right? I know that's my story. That is. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in drinking again. So So I just want to say that my life today, I was in a Tradition 5 study this morning. And Bill Wilson talks about how Tradition 5, this is the entire, what does it say in Comes of Age? This is the entire reason of our existence, is carrying our message, carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And it just dawned on me that is the entire purpose of my life, is to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And I didn't realize, I wanted it to be that, and I could say, oh yeah, that's what it is. But it wasn't until I started working here that I really began to understand how powerful Alcoholics Anonymous is, and how just amazing this program is. The steps are great. I've worked the steps a million times. I've led workshops. I've taken people through the steps, and that's great. That's what I needed. Obviously, that's what we need to get sober, right? That is having had a spiritual experience, spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, right? Then we carry the message. But starting to work here, I really realized how awesome and how much breadth there is to this program and the traditions, which I knew, but I didn't really understand how it manifests itself through the intergroup offices around the country, through the service structures, and then of course the concepts. I can remember when I was like 30 days sober. I went. This is a funny story for me. And anybody who knows Steve C., our past delegate, he spoke here a few weeks ago. I was like 30 days sober. I went to Miracle Hall when it used to be down above JCPenney in Auburn. It was such a beautiful hall. And I announced, I announced I was in my first 30 days. And he comes rushing up to me after the meeting and hands me a service manual. This is the most important book that you could ever read in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm thinking, shit, right? I didn't pick up a service manual until years later. I think I cracked it and went, this is like Greek to me. I can barely read the big book. I would read it to fall asleep, right? So anyway, it's just a funny story. But I love how much I'm learning about Alcoholics Anonymous, and thank you to Ostry for that. She was first my service sponsor, and then became my sponsor. My first sponsor drank after 29 years of sobriety, and I was still friends with her on Facebook. And it was about 2 months ago she sent me a message and asked me to send her a schedule for Pierce County meetings, and anyway, I haven't heard from her since. I told her I'd be happy to go to a meeting with her, and I'm not sure where she's at with that, but I have to stay in the middle. I have to stay in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I will fall off. And the next thing I need to say is that getting sober young, which I know that we've heard some people speak, and Bob's here. He's one of my compadres that got sober, in their teens. There's not a lot of us around, so we kind of know who each other are, right? And what happens is that I got sober. Getting sober young made me, the desperation that is needed to turn your will and life over to the care of God. I did it enough to get sober and stay sober, but I kind of live my life on self-propulsion for most of my sobriety, and because of that, I have caused a lot of harm in sobriety. I'm on marriage number 3, although we've been together 20 years now, and we have 2 beautiful kids, and I think I finally calmed down enough to stay married. He's on marriage 3 too, so we're on the same page here. I've caused some harm in sobriety, right? I caused a lot of harm to that first husband that I mentioned. I caused a lot of harm to that child that we had together. Um, there's things that I really wondered, gosh, how could, the promises, that one of the promises came true for me right away, which is that we will gain interest in our fellows, right? That was like immediate. And that's a joke. Anyway, but the promise of we will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. I don't regret my drinking. I know that with my experience, I can avert death and misery for countless people, right? I get that. I've made some pretty dire mistakes in sobriety that I've had a hard time uh, healing from. Even after making amends, the shame just goes on and on in my mind and what I've realized is that in our book it talks about our past in God's hands, right? Can be our greatest asset. And what I realize is that I need that past to be in God's hands, not mine, because I'll just wallow around in my self-centered egotistical shame, right? In God's hands, that's where it belongs. And that's something that's fairly recent. And I got to say, because of COVID, I was able to, turn into the Zoom meetings every morning at 8:30 and join the meditation meeting, right? And I was able to go to one of Stephen and Nancy's workshops that they led, which took you through the work in a different kind of way that has been life-changing in many ways. And, to understand that, just to see just all the crazy delusional stuff that my ego comes up with in sobriety. I said something the other day, which is so funny. Like, I'm totally in delusion about what's happened in the past. I'm way in fantasy about what might be happening in the future, and I probably have no idea what's happening right now. Really, I'm in a whole bunch of delusion most of the time about what I think is going on. So I really feel more comfortable now than ever that I don't have all the information, right? Thank you for that. Because that's been life-changing. I don't have all the information. That just frees me up from, I don't have to judge anybody, right? I do, but I don't have to. And it's just how much freedom is in that. And it just, with the resentments, I don't get what I think I deserve. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so exhausting. It's just exhausting. So I have found a way of life in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous that I would not trade for anything, even if I would, right? So I'll just share this story about, I have an alcoholic father who celebrated 40 years in February. And I have an alcoholic mom who passed away a couple years ago, but we used to drink and use lots of drugs together. Her philosophy was that if you're not out doing it, I don't have to worry about you, so please stay home. So all my friends would come to the house. We turned into the party house. I had a basement full of pot. Everybody was happy. My mother and I got sober on the same day, and she died without having taken a drink. But I did want to share this. My alcoholic father, I spent a lot of years in therapy talking about my alcoholic father, talking about my abandonment issues and my shame issues and that sort of thing. And again, I'm going to emphasize that's not why I'm an alcoholic. And I also want to emphasize is that therapy was okay, but it's not the thing that freed me from that the effects of that childhood. So I'm going to tell you a story that when I went through that workshop at 4.5 years of sobriety, that was the first time I made amends when I got to step 9, and I made amends to my father, who was, he was sober by then, and he hadn't made amends to me, right? Which was, God, an issue, and but I called him. I said I wanted to make amends to him, and I made amends to him for not being the kind of daughter I wanted to be because of my resentment towards him, and that I was sorry for that. And he just started crying, and then he in turn made amends to me, and so. And me and my dad have a great relationship today. It's not, man. If anybody's balking at their amends because the son of a bitch did more harm to you than you did to them, I just strongly urge you to go anyway and make the amends, because you have no idea what's going to happen. And that's the great thing about amends, is that you have no idea, right? You have no idea what's going to happen. You think you have an idea. I think I have an idea, but I'm always amazed at when sponsees or myself, I go and make amends, what happens. I'm always amazed at what happens, especially of the ones that are the most filled with pain. So that is a story, and I love listening to people's stories. And so that's why we have these stories on the website. It's called Listen to a Story. It's like we're sitting around a campfire telling stories, and there's healing with that. There's it harkens with all kinds of ancient reality and channeling of God, and so it's through COVID, I have a closer relationship with my higher power than I ever have in my sobriety, ever. And so I heard today on this podcast that I was listening to about how there's 2 ways to God, and the one is pain and the other one's prayer. And I hadn't ever really heard it put that way. And I thought, man, I just really like to learn things the hard way, right? I mean, I just have learned a lot of stuff through pain in sobriety. And I don't know if it's because I'm getting older and I just don't, or what. I don't know what it is, but I am ready and have dedicated myself the last few years, a couple years especially, to developing that conscious contact with power greater than myself, right? Praying only not for the knowledge of God's will for me and the power to carry that out. I mean, how many times have I read it? How many times have we heard it? How many step 11 studies have we been in? But it's really, really, I could live my life through self-propulsion, or I can begin to tap the unsuspected inner resource that it talks about in the book. Which is really great. I mean, that's where my freedom is. I'm just sure of it. So I'm super grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm super grateful for Seattle Intergroup. This place is the most amazing place, and I love it. And I'm just, thank you for asking me to talk.
Hey, honey. Hey, Lara. Can you